So healthcare nationally, we all know it's been increasing at an unsustainable rate since the late 90s. If you see a graph of healthcare costs from 1999 to 2025, it is incredible to see the cost increase year after year after year.
And everyone's seen that graph. The Kaiser Family Foundation graph goes up and to the right, families on the top, singles on the bottom. If you haven't seen that, go Google it, and you'll quickly realize the problem at hand. It's not just the media, it's not just what's out there, but healthcare costs are going up and to the right, doubling, tripling, quadrupling, over the last decade. And it's important to understand when you take a step back, it's important for not just employers to understand that, it's important for employees to understand that and what's happening behind the scenes and really what's happening to them once they go use that insurance card. What happens? How's a claim paid? How's it processed? That's impacting those national costs.
And like you just said, it's not sustainable. But The problem is there's no transparency in why these costs are raising, and employers have no idea why they're getting these increases. And we've worked with a lot of companies who have been in this boat.
Yeah.
They're getting increases, they don't know why, and they're all across the country. Idaho, Arizona, Florida, Texas, Boston, New York. It's happening all across the country, and employers can't figure out why it's happening because there's no visibility. And Brandon, I'd love to hear your story of a client in Arizona that you've been working with for a while, where they were, how they felt, and really where they are today.
Yeah, and their story is really interesting because it's one that specifically shows a product is not the solution. The solution is really, figuring out where you're at, where you want to go, and then how do we get there? Specifically for them, based out of Arizona, a couple hundred employees on the plan. They were actually self-funded at the time when we started working with them. But the program they were in did not match really anything that they were trying to accomplish, and there was a ton of frustration. And the frustration initially was with cost, but it also came with access of care, and then it came with employee understanding of why the plan is what it is. They'd been working with a group for a long time, and had success with them. But it had gotten to a point where, they'd gotten into a product they really didn't understand. They didn't understand how it matched their risk appetite. But then when they really got frustrated is when the surprise came of, funding, how they were funding the program, and really their dollars, while they were self-funded, they weren't able to control any of their costs. And what it came down to is when we started talking to them and asking the questions of, hey, can you guys share why you're in this type of program? No. Can you share what you're looking to accomplish in this type of program? And they all said lower cost. Well, the program they were in didn't match that because they weren't able to control any of their dollars. So we started looking at that, in year one, just made some tweaks just to the program and really they probably added 40% back to the bottom line, and were able to control the program, control their cash, and actually see where the dollars were now going. They weren't privy to that, even though they were self-funded. It was really interesting. The second piece, though, then came with the partners in the program. And when we started working with their partners and the vendors in the program, you could tell instantly when we started asking questions. Hey, how are you guys being compensated? What does success look like? What's your all's experience with this program look like? And really, what's your experience with the leadership of this company look like? And you could tell really quickly that was not the conversation that the partners and the vendors in this ecosystem were having previously. I don't know what was happening, but there is not a lot of visibility to the client as to what was happening behind the scenes in their own program. We then, sat down with their leadership team and really built a vision. Hey, what are we looking to accomplish? What's the plan? And for them, they're in a hyper growth mode. They're trying to get their employees the best plan they could at the lowest cost possible. And I think that's a lot of people's goal, but at the end of the day is cost, what's that look like? And it's different for different companies. Just having the lowest cost, there's a bunch of ways to get there, but this group was willing to introduce a lot of friction. And what I mean by that is, things like narrow networks or no networks, things like very high touch pharmaceutical management programs. But their employees, they had some of these things in place, but employees had no clue why. So we started educating employees on that, got the vendors aligned with what the group was actually trying to accomplish. And for 3 years in a row now, we've seen their costs decrease annually. If we look back, their costs today are lower than they were 5 years ago as an organization on a per employee per year standpoint. And that's how we track that, right? Is that per employee per month or per employee per year cost? Because we want to account for headcount, we want to account for growth, And for them, it's allowed them to go into new markets. It's allowed them to enhance the plan. And for this year, since they've performed so well as an organization when it came to healthcare and benefits, they were able to deploy programs with less friction. They're to that point where they said, hey, okay, let's back off a little bit. Let's still keep that as our staple of the program. We want to apply, we want to have our employees have access to a low-cost program, going to help them get, that preventative care, going to help them get their maintenance drugs at lowest costs possible, and really free, pretty much across the board. But we want to deploy something to help our individuals that are looking for that, more open access. They're looking to have more of I would say just a engagement with healthcare that has less friction and more of a quote unquote traditional model. We still are able to have stops in place to help people access care. They need to help people get their prescriptions at the lowest cost possible, have some of that navigation. But at the end of the day, they put the strategy in place 4 and 5 years ago that's allowed them to now, as they go grow across the country, to be able to allow new employees to have the option to choose. And employees understand why. Hey, we can go in this program. It has a little more restrictions. It's more high touch. It's more engagement. But to me, it's little to no cost. Or, hey, I've got to get some skin in the game. I want a little more open access. I want less friction. I want to have a more traditional feel in my healthcare. So giving those two options hasn't come overnight by any means. And you can hear that story. It really took 3 years for them, but it matched what they were looking to accomplish. And as we look out over the next 2 and 3 years, we're probably in a point where now we're just managing the claims of the program and not necessarily disrupting the ecosystem or the vendors.